Okay, so let's dive into this case that you suggested,
Right.
the Jamie Kloss case. And when I first got your request, I have to admit, my first thought was another true crime story. But then I
Oh,
started looking into it, and oh my goodness,
yeah.
this is much more than just another true crime story. This is a story of survival against impossible odds.
Absolutely.
This is a story that raises questions about the nature of evil and the resilience of the human spirit. And, it all started on a seemingly ordinary night in Barron, Wisconsin on October 15th, 2018 for the
Mhm.
Kloss family. It turned into a nightmare.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating about this case is that it seems like a totally random act of violence. You've got this 21-year-old Jake Patterson,
Right.
no prior criminal history,
Yeah.
just seemingly living an ordinary life, and yet he commits this horrific crime.
Yeah. You know what's fascinating about this case is that it really throws a wrench into our typical understanding of crime and motive. We like to categorize things right, to believe that there's always a reason, a clear explanation.
Yeah.
But the more you delve into the Jamie Kloss story, the more you realize that sometimes evil can be utterly random.
Totally. And on that night in Barron, Wisconsin, there was absolutely no connection between Jamie and her abductor, Jake Patterson.
Mm.
He was a 21-year-old nobody, no criminal record, just living an ordinary life. Yet he meticulously planned this abduction, even taping over his license plates and disabling his car's dome light.
And that level of premeditation is what makes this case so chilling. It wasn't a crime of passion, a spur-of-the-moment act.
Yeah.
This was calculated evil.
Right.
And that's a really tough pill to swallow.
It is. And the sources really paint a very vivid picture of that night. The family dog starts barking. Jamie and her mom wake up, and her dad, James Kloss, he goes to investigate. He sees Patterson at the door, shines a flashlight on him, and boom,
Wow.
Patterson fires a fatal shot.
You can almost hear the echoes of that gunshot in the 911 call Denise Kloss made from the bathroom where she and Jamie were hiding.
Oh my gosh.
You hear her fear, her desperation to protect her daughter. It's heartbreaking.
And then the sounds of Patterson breaking in, shooting through the bathroom doorknob, stepping over James's body. It's just
Chilling.
chilling. It's almost too much to bear. He forces Denise to tie up Jamie with duct tape, and then right in front of her, he murders her.
It makes you wonder about the human psyche, doesn't it? What could possibly drive a person to commit such a horrific act seemingly out of nowhere?
Yeah.
In Patterson's confession, there was no remorse, no explanation, just a blank void where a motive should be.
That blankness, that lack of any comprehensible reason is what makes this case so unsettling, because it suggests that maybe sometimes there are no easy answers, no psychological profiles, no childhood traumas that neatly explain away such evil.
And that's a terrifying thought, isn't it? The idea that evil can exist without a clear origin story, without a predictable pattern. It throws our whole sense of order and justice out the window.
It really does. So Patterson drags Jimmy out of the house, throws her in the trunk of his car, and they're gone. The police arrive minutes later to a scene I can't even imagine. But by then, Jamie is already on her way to Patterson's isolated cabin, which becomes her prison for the next 87 days.
87 days.
Think about that for a moment. Almost 3 months in captivity, imprisoned under a bed, threatened with death if she made a sound. The sources I've read describe how Patterson would even have guests over to the cabin while Jamie was hidden just inches away. It's mind-boggling.
It's like he wanted to exert absolute control to make her completely dependent on him for her very survival.
That's a hallmark of this type of offender. It's not just about the physical control, it's about the psychological domination, the breaking down of someone's spirit.
But here's the thing, Jamie never broke.
Yeah.
And that's where her story takes an incredible turn.
It's tough to even imagine, isn't it?
I can't even imagine.
Being held captive like that for 87 days. It's just mind-boggling. And what kept her going? What did she do to survive that ordeal? What sources did you find about that?
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of research out there about the psychology of survival. And what experts have found is that resilience isn't just about mental toughness.
Okay.
It's often about finding those tiny glimmers of hope,
Yeah.
those small acts of defiance that keep the spirit alive.
Right.
So for Jamie, it might have been something as simple as, holding on to the memory of her family,
Yeah.
or even just the act of, breathing deeply, reminding herself that she was still alive,
Right.
still in control of her own body.
Right. And that's a really powerful point. Even in the darkest of places, the human spirit has this amazing ability to adapt and find ways to cope.
And eventually that spark of defiance turned into a daring escape.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. She pushes aside this barricade,
Yeah.
runs out into the freezing Wisconsin winter wearing Patterson's oversized shoes on the wrong feet.
On the wrong feet.
Wow. That detail about the shoes really underscores the urgency of her escape. I mean, she wasn't thinking about comfort or practicality.
Right.
She was running on pure adrenaline and instinct.
Talk about fight or flight response.
Oh, absolutely. This is like something out of a movie.
It is.
And then, of course, you have this incredible moment when she encounters a woman walking her dog.
Oh, yeah.
And this woman recognizes Jamie from the missing person posters.
Yep.
It's almost too good to be true.
It really is. You know,
Yeah.
some people might say it was fate, like the universe was on her side that day.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
But let's not forget that Jamie had to make that initial decision to escape, to risk everything
Right.
for a chance at freedom. And that takes a level of courage that's hard to comprehend.
Absolutely. And even after she escaped, Jamie still had a long road ahead of her. I mean, she was dealing with PTSD, anxiety nightmares. How do you even begin to heal after something like that?
That's where the real work begins. And, it's important to understand that healing from trauma isn't linear. There are good days and bad days. There are setbacks and triumphs. But what Jamie's story shows us is that with the right support,
Yeah.
with therapy and the love of her family,
Mm-hmm.
it is possible to reclaim your life.
And reclaim it. She did. I mean, she went back to school, started rebuilding relationships, even shared her story publicly to help other survivors. Talk about turning pain into purpose.
It's remarkable.
Mm.
And it speaks to the power of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to not only bounce back from adversity,
Mm-hmm.
but to use it as fuel for growth.
Right. She didn't let this experience define her. She redefined it.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important message for anyone who's going through something difficult, whether it's trauma, grief loss, or even just a really tough time in life. There's always hope. There's always the potential for healing and growth.
So we've talked about the horrors of the abduction, the incredible escape, and Jamie's journey to healing. But there's still a big question looming. How can we prevent something like this from happening again?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. There's no magic formula for preventing random acts of violence.
You're right. I mean, we can't live in a world where we're constantly looking over our shoulders, suspicious of everyone we meet.
Exactly. But I think what we can do is foster a culture of awareness, of community support, encourage people to speak up if they see something that seems off, to check in on their neighbors, to create an environment where everyone feels safe and connected.
Because maybe, just maybe, if we can strengthen those community bonds, if we can learn to recognize the warning signs, we can prevent another tragedy like the Jamie Kloss case.
It's a complex issue for sure. But I think starting with that foundation of community and awareness is a good first step.
It's really hard to grapple with, isn't it?
Is
This idea that something like this could just happen so randomly.
It's unsettling. It really throws a wrench into our sense of order in the world.
It does. Because if it could happen to Jamie Kloss in this seemingly ordinary town in Wisconsin, couldn't it happen anywhere?
Right. It makes you question your own safety
It does.
and the safety of your loved ones.
Absolutely. And I think that's why this case continues to fascinate us.
Yeah.
Because it challenges our assumptions about good and evil, about our own ability to control our destiny.
I think it also forces us to confront our own vulnerabilities, our own fears.
Yeah, and it makes us think about, how we as a society respond to these kinds of events.
Absolutely. Because there was a huge national conversation that happened after this
Right.
about random acts of violence.
Yeah, I remember when this happened. It was all over the news, and everybody was trying to make sense of it.
Right. Or there are debates about gun control,
Oh, yeah.
about mental health,
Mhm.
about the role of law enforcement.
All of that. And those are all important conversations to have. But I think what sometimes gets lost in those conversations is the individual story, the human cost of this crime.
That's a really good point, because we can get so caught up in the statistics and the policy debates that we forget about the real people whose lives have been shattered.
Exactly. And in this case, that real person is Jamie Kloss.
Right.
She's the one who lived through this unimaginable experience. She found the strength to escape. She fought her way back to a semblance of normalcy.
And that's what's so remarkable about her story, is that resilience. The refusal to be defined by what happened.
It is.
To me, that's the most hopeful element of this whole story.
Yeah, I mean, despite everything she went through, she found a way to reclaim her life, to find hope, to inspire others.
It's incredible.
And that's a powerful message for our listeners today.
What's that?
That even in the face of evil, even in the face of unimaginable darkness, the human spirit can endure.
I completely agree. It's really inspiring.
And that there is always the potential for healing, for growth, for finding meaning and purpose, even in the aftermath of trauma.
Beautifully said.
So, for anyone out there who's listening today, and you're struggling with your own darkness, with your own pain, know that you're not alone. There's strength inside of you, even if you can't see it yet. And there are people who care about you, who want to help you find your way back to the light.
Well said.
So on that note, I think we'll wrap up our deep dive into the Jamie Kloss case.
It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.